So I guess, yeah, a lot about sustainability. I'm going to introduce a couple of additional topics and comments here. I'm going to talk about circular as a comment too, and as a topic. And as I talk about this, I want to also highlight a couple of collaborators. We heard about the Dairy Innovation Hub and several researchers who have got some funded projects are contributing to this area, but also our near neighbors, the Great Lakes Bioenergy Center, which has a lot of fermentation expertise. Tim and Dan are active in this area with us as well. So let me just walk you through a little bit about the circular dairy industry vision or concept here. I'm going to take one piece of that, and I'm going to talk about, from the processing side. Once we move off the farm, or mostly off the farm, what are we dealing with at that level? I would say what we're dealing with is we've got challenges with the co-products, waste streams that we're generating. Farms have got bigger, but also the plants have got much bigger in the last 20, 30 years. Those factories or plants, they spend millions of dollars every year both constructing waste treatment facilities and then operating them. And I look at it as the word waste is a very useful word because you're wasting a lot of money, I would say, as my team. But you have to deal with these co-products of these components that we're not using to make cheese, but it's residual. We also have those at the farm that we've mentioned, like manure, and they contribute significantly to some of the emissions we were just talking about. So that's one target area I'm going to spend some time on. There are, from our dairy and industry production products, we generate a lot of low-value products. We always focus, of course, on the high-value cheese and whey powders and whey proteins, etc. But we also generate a lot of low-value co-products. These are permeates, which if you don't know what that is, that's after we filter out the protein. There's some lactose and salts and a little bit of other components in it. Not much value in that. Acid whey from Greek yogurt, for example. Massive increase in production of Greek yogurt in the last 20 years, but we're generating a lot of whey because we separate the product and we left with this liquid whey. It's a kind of equivalent to cheese whey. They end up being used as animal feed, so at least that's a use, but it's a low value use, I would say. These co-products are often land spread, and back to what Michelle was talking about, this is part of the issue we have to deal with, what's happening to our land and where is it going, to our water and soil. And I think, we're all recognizing that there's a negative environmental consequence from those if they were overused or abused. I grew up on a farm, and it's very hard to deal with some of these things at certain times of the year. When can you spread? When can you not spread? Does it leach? Does it not? And it's going to get more challenging. We know that as environmental regulations get tighter, get stricter because of some of the concerns we talked about this afternoon. Another issue is that the volumes are getting bigger. If you go back to 100 years ago, there was a little creamery at every crossroads, and they could send back the whey or the co-products back to the farmer to feed pigs or to feed animals. And that was kind of a circular route for using up those co-products. But now the plants are so big, they really can't send all the stuff back. And that's been one of the challenges about siting some of the Greek yogurt plants in places like New York, where you're going to send all this acid whey. You quickly run out of fields to spread it on. And what are you going to do with all this material? So the volumes have got substantially larger over the last 30 years. One option that some plants will do, we had a massive new dairy plant put in Michigan in the last couple of years, and right beside that massive cheese plant was a drying facility to dry the permeate products, these co-products that we're talking about. But primarily those co-products are then shipped internationally, a lot of it to China, to feed hogs in another part of the world. So you can imagine drying, as a food processing person myself, super expensive, energy intensive process. We're spending a lot of energy and cost and fossil fuels, et cetera, to dry, and then we're shipping it thousands of miles to feed animals. So again, is this a sustainable way? There wasn't much other option for them. They wanted to build a big, massive cheese plant. What are they going to do with the permeate? This was the only other option that they really could come up with. Another unrelated topic, you might say, is plastics. I'm going to divert a little bit and talk a little bit about plastics. Came back from a visit, a meeting at a large dairy company in the last couple of weeks, and talking about food packaging, dairy packaging, recyclability, sustainability, what's going to happen with it in the future. But the reality is most plastics that we use for dairy and food plastic are fossil derived. They're derived from fossil fuels. I'll get into that a little bit. Only about 1% of the plastics we use today are bio-based. So that means they're coming from something like corn or sugarcane or something like that. Almost all of them are coming from fossil fuel. So we talk about fossil fuel for energy, but we also have it used for plastics as well. Most of the plastics we use today in our everyday life are non-recyclable. Most of them are non-biodegradable. So they're something that basically lasts almost indefinitely. And then we have, everybody talk about plastic bottles and environmental concerns, et cetera. And we have microplastics. I don't know if you're hearing about it, but we ingest microplastics and we don't know what they do to us. We don't know whether it has a health impact. But again, the issue there is that they don't digest, so that's part of the issue. They might be very small, but we don't really know what the long-term impact is. And there are some estimates that in the not too distant future, the contribution from plastics production will rival the climate impact of all our coal-fired stations here in the US. So that seemed like a pretty big number. So why do I bring up plastics? One of the ways to think about this as a circular bioeconomy and having dairy play a role in it. So instead of talking about the waste word, let's use a different terminology in terms of waste streams and use something that my friends and colleagues that I work with talk about. We look at these as organic feedstocks. It's not waste materials. These are chemistry. It's chemistry 101 if you like, but they're organic materials that are made up of carbon, nitrogen, and other materials. And they could come from manure from farms. They can come from this acid whey or cheese whey that we're talking about. They are all organic feedstocks. These feedstocks, when I talk to Tim and Dan and others that deal with in the Great Lakes Bioenergy Center, they're dealing mostly with forestry type products, or wood products, or lignocellular type materials. Those are very complicated materials, and they have to spend a lot of time and energy and processes to extract some sugars from those materials before they can start to ferment them and convert them into something valuable. Our materials are very simple. When we start talking about the materials that are coming from our dairy waste, if you look at the cheese waste and others, it's lactose. It's a disaccharide. It's a simple sugar. It's about as simple as you possibly can get. Could these be fermented into what I would call green chemicals? Is going to be what I'm talking about today. So this is a little bit beyond the biodigesters. I know Mark is probably going to talk about biodigesters on their processing. But what I'm talking about here is going a little bit beyond just that process, expanding it out to replacing chemicals that are derived today from fossil fuels. If we step back and talk about where we are today, we do have a lot of knowledge in the cheese side of things about bacteria that ferment lactose to make acid, because that's the basis of cheese and yogurt industry. We're focused on making the products, but we have bacteria and yeast that know how to ferment these very well and produce things like acids and other materials. We also have tools at hand in the modern microbiological sense to engineer these bugs to make all kinds of things, tools that we did not have 20 years ago. There's been a revolution, if you haven't been taking notice, with CRISPR technologies and other technologies that can be applied. I would say that since we have cows that are producing milk every year, this is a renewable source. If we don't get rid of the cows, okay, we're going to have manure, we're going to have cheese ways, we're going to have acid ways. So we have this renewable feedstock that's available every year for us to do something with. And at the end of the day, we need to talk about not just feeding the world, maybe we're talking about saving the world as part of this discussion as well. So my theme here that I want to highlight to you is, could we use dairy co-products, stuff that we consider waste or problems, or things we have to land spread or feed to cattle? Could we use them to make value-added products in the future? These are raw materials. These are organic materials. And these could produce all kinds of products, and I'll give you some idea of what kind of products. There are research going on this campus and other campuses. And when we start thinking about is there a lot of these co-products? The numbers are enormous. Across the US, because we produce cheese, we produce 120 billion pounds of whey every year because we produce cheese, and only about 10% of milk ends up in cheese of the mass. The 90% ends up in the liquid whey. So we have enormous amounts of these feedstocks. Over 600,000 tons of it are dried into permeate every year. 600,000 tons. That seems like it's almost like criminal that we're spending that amount of energy and cost to dry something instead of using it for some productive use. This mostly ends up, this dry permeate ends up being shipped and fed overseas to animals. And if we talk about acid whey that I talk about, there's about 2 million metric tons of it produced every year. And those guys are desperate looking for uses for it. What are some things we could start to produce from these feedstocks? Everything I'm going to show on the slide, there is research work on it already. So this is not 5-10 years down the road. The commercialization of it might be taking some time, and I'll talk about why that might be. We could make a range of organic acids. There are companies, and there are startup companies that are already making these from a range of agricultural stocks. They're not big at the moment, but they have published studies on how to do this. Some of them have spun off startup companies to make medium chain fatty acids and a couple of other acids. One very interesting one is we could use these to make the polymers that make the biodegradable bioplastics. There are two major ones that could be used to make these biodegradable bioplastics. One is polylactic acid, and if you start to think about lactic acid in cheese, yeah, we make a lot of lactic acid in cheese, so our bugs can be engineered to make these. They have to be made with very high purity, so there's a wrinkle in it. And another one is PHB, and I'll give you some example of that. Research going on right across the street as of today. And another idea or platform is what they call platform chemicals. So what do I mean by that? So when crude oil goes into a refinery, they make fuel to run our cars, but they also make a bunch of chemicals that we then use to make all kinds of things in everyday life. Those things are called platform chemicals that are bought by other chemical companies that are used to make all kinds of products. And these are usually higher value-added products. And here are a couple of examples of them that can be made. Everything here in this slide, I want to tell you, somebody on this campus is doing research on right now. One of the things to think about, not just talk about plastics, it's not just about creating new ways to replace fuel for our cars and for our planes and so on. Beyond the fuels, 90% of the chemicals we use today in our everyday life, and we need them for our operation, are fossil derived. So we're going to have to find another way to make these chemicals, otherwise we won't enjoy the life we have today or the kind of materials we have. It's not just about transportation. And most of that is fossil derived right now. And of course, we could make food materials and supplements. We know a lot about that as well. One of the concepts I want to get across is that, when you think about the crude oil, that goes to a refinery, okay? And the concept of a refinery is breaking this down into a lot of different components, and each of the components has some value added. These could be stuff that's used for fuels or for energy, but chemicals and so on. So when crude oil goes into a refinery and a bunch of things come out the other side. We could have the same type of refinery, except this is now a biorefinery. We could have dairy biomass going into it, and then we could be producing fuels. We could be producing energy to run the whole plant, and we could also be producing these chemicals. So that would be a biorefinery. The only difference is the organic materials that are going in there. It's not fossil fuels. It would be coming from dairy biomass. Here's just an example I mentioned about making some of these biodegradable bioplastic material polymers. This is Erica Magender, right across the street in bacteriology. Lactic acid. Lactic acid has a world market of about 150,000 tons, which is about a $3 billion market, roughly. But it has a growth rate of at least 10% compound growth rate per year. And since it's a key polymer that's used to make bioplastics, you can imagine as people switch to bioplastic production, this rate is going to increase dramatically, and the yield is phenomenal. You've got about a 99% conversion rate from lactose to lactic acid. The big issue is trying to purify it, and I'll talk about what those issues are. So for it to move forward with using renewable sources, I'm very interested in the dairy side of things, but there are other renewable sources. What would it take to get all of these things to be commercial reality? There are parts, buckets that I look at here. We'd need to do some engineering of microbes to produce the end product. And you saw some of the examples of pathways that have to be engineered and things like that. Much of them will be done by fermentation. We have a lot of fermentation expertise on this campus. And we would need to figure out not just the bugs, but what kind of reactors, conditions, temperatures, et cetera, et cetera. And a big one is how to isolate that. You've produced, let's say you produced a new polymer, a new chemical, lactic acid, whatever. You have to separate it from everything else that's in there as well. And that can be a big bottleneck in it. How do you do that? How can you do it cost effectively? How can you get rid of the other stuff to make highly pure stuff? For example, for the polylactic acid that used to make plastics, it has to be 99% pure. So there's a lot of purification steps. Then you've got to scale up. We don't really on this campus have any abilities to scale up any of these processes right now. People are working at, 5 mil, 10 mils, a liter. They're working at tiny scale. We need to invest in those. And I put stars beside it that CDR is investing. This is why I'm up here, I guess, is we're investing in the isolation and the scale up. We don't do the engineering of bugs and some of the other ones. And we need to figure out which of these processes are cost effective as well. Lastly, I just want to mention about, this seems like it would take a lot of work and effort to get all of these things going. This seems like a big change. So last year, there was a new initiative that the National Science Foundation announced. It was a brand new one for them. It's called Regional Innovation Engines. And this had two programs that they provided. One was a planning grant, which is about $1 million. And then if you won a Type 2 award, this was for a regional engine. It would be $160 million over a 10-year period. Big dollars, I guess, even for our big campus here, I guess. We submitted a proposal on this topic that I've just been talking about, which is one of the reasons I want to come up and talk to you about it today. Our title is Decarbonize Agricultural Residues, so that's beyond dairy. So we brought in the meat guys, we brought in the vegetable processing guys, the major sectors of our agricultural production here in the state by biotransformations, whether that's fermentations or something else, and to power a new bioeconomy. Lots of people were interested in that concept, I have to tell you. Lots of people across our state. 5 campuses. We have a total of 60 people who signed up to be interested in collaborating in this concept or idea. And you can see it's from our Department of Ag to our campuses, Clean Wisconsin, from the environmental groups, from 4 regional colleges, because this NSF Regional Engine Program said it's not just about research, it's about commercialization, educational, broad impacts across your state. So I'm hoping that we will get funded for that. We will find out this spring. But bringing this group together really helps us to tackle some of this climate smart issues that we're talking about of how do we use the stuff we produce in a positive way rather than talking about it as a waste material and a drag in our system. So concluding, my thoughts here is we take lemons and we make lemonade. How do we take problems and turn them into opportunities to create some value-added products? It will create jobs, it will create opportunities, and they will be in local communities as well. We can take biofermentations of these waste streams from manure all the way up to cheese and acid waste, and they can make chemicals and plastics and other materials, all kinds of cool things. We got to wean ourselves off some of those fossil fuel things anyway. And is there a way to get this done? I think DART is one idea for it to get it done, because it will need a large team to move this forward towards this climate smart or net zero goal. So thank you for your attention.